go. Welcome back to Swell. I'm Corey Johnson, the Chief Market Strategist for Ripple, and we're glad to have you guys all here. This is a big event for us every year. I think it's sort of the general Ripple community, people who are really at the cutting edge of adopting Ripple solutions for all kinds of issues. Really the cutting edge people are all here gathered together. So we're hoping you're getting a lot of time to talk with each other and kind of learn from each other, as well as from what we've got on the stage. What we've got on the stage coming up right now is more of our CEO, Brad Garlinghouse. Brad, come on in.
Thank you, Corey, and great to see you all back up here. One of the lessons I take away so far from the conference today, as a reminder to self, if you're doing your own conference and you're planning when you speak in the conference, don't plan for right after one of the great orators on the planet, Bill Clinton. I'd much rather not be speaking after him, but I'll try to share with you a few thoughts here along the way about really the big picture of what Ripple has been about from the earliest days. The first slide here is really highlighting something we call enabling the Internet of Value. I'm thinking the clicker's going to work here. We'll see. There we go. All right. So when Ripple thinks about big picture what we're doing, it has been about changing the nature of how value moves. We think that over the next couple of decades, there are staggering possibilities in terms of how commerce can change, how society can change based upon a dramatic reduction in friction of payments. Now, that's not going to happen overnight, and certainly it does take a grassroots movement. But what I'd like to share with you over the next 20 plus minutes is really where some of the origins of Ripple has come from, as well as share with you a couple of announcements we're making today for the first time. Now, to start off, I thought I would share, I joined Ripple 3.5 years ago, and I will say a big part of the reason I joined the company was really Chris Larson's vision. Chris Larson, the co-founder of Ripple, really from the earliest days has talked about this Internet of Value. And Chris has demonstrated a track record of seeing around corners. First with eLoan and really democratizing the lending industry using the internet. More recently with Prosper. But I think he would acknowledge Ripple is the biggest bet. I think it's the most profound effort and has the potential to have the biggest impact. But one of the things Chris has also emphasized from the earliest days of my joining Ripple is the idea that we have to be builders. You know, Silicon Valley, over the last 25 years that I've been here, loves to talk about disruption. Disruption is great catnip for the media. It's great catnip for investors. But at the end of the day, sometimes disruption is exactly what you don't need. When we think about building, when we think about working with the industry, it's something that has distinguished Ripple from the earliest days of its founding. It wasn't about how do we tear down governments and how do we replace fiat currency. It wasn't about replacing banks. It was about realizing that there's very good reasons why we have the infrastructure we have, but there's an opportunity to be a builder and to partner with the industry to really enable something that hasn't yet been seen. We believe we're at the dawn of another era of globalization. But when you step back and think about it, like this visual, like the missing wheels on this skateboard, something's missing. When you think about what globalization requires to truly enable globalization, it really is a three-legged piece. Much like fire that requires fuel, oxygen, I'm having trouble with this clicker, there we go, fuel, oxygen, and heat to bring that flame together. The same thing is true around globalization. There's three networks that we think have to come together to work interoperably. The first two are data interoperability. That's the internet. It has had a profound impact on globalization. The second is goods and shipping. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But the third and missing piece in terms of interoperable networks is around money. Money today is not interoperable. All of us, if you're here at Swell, it's certainly something that you know well. Now, if we step back and look at how we got here in other interoperable areas, the goods industry, some of you might have wondered, there's a kind of mock-up of a container, a cargo container downstairs. Some of you may have noticed and thought, what's up with the cargo container? It's kind of odd to be placed there. When Ripple thinks about what we're building, we use a cargo container sometimes as a metaphor for the interoperability. The reason is this is a visual in the early 1900s of what a shipping dock looked like. Now you think about the pain of enabling shipping when every port had a different infrastructure. Every package was packaged up differently. It made shipping incompatible. It wasn't interoperable. Now imagine taking that one of these packages and moving it onto a train. Everything was not interoperable. In the 50s, we invented something kind of mundane, the cargo container. This cargo container enabled interoperability between boats, trains, trucks, and over the next 2 decades, we saw a 700% increase in global commerce. This was the interoperability of different networks coming together to reduce friction and reduce cost in a very material way. Now, if you look at that on the data side, and I'll spend less time on the data side because I think people know it well, but it wasn't that long ago. I know there's some young people in the audience that are surprised when you talk about this, but it wasn't that long ago. We talked about, you put a postcard in the mail, you put a stamp on it, you had no idea when it got there, you had no idea actually if it got there, compared to today, the explosion of instant messaging in various forms, whether you're using Snapchat or all the different ones. The thing I'll point out is as the friction went down, there's been an explosion in the usage. So even 10 years ago, or maybe 15 years ago, every time you sent an SMS text message, it cost 25 cents. And then it went down to 10 cents, and now it's virtually free. And if you look at the charts of usage of these types of messaging, it continues to grow exponentially because the friction keeps coming down. So imagine how that applies to the $1.6 trillion per year that we spend as a society for making money interoperable. There's tremendous friction. That friction is measured by time, it's measured by cost, and frankly, it's measured by error rates. So we think there's a tremendous opportunity to change the nature. The other thing I'll just comment on briefly, particularly having had President Clinton up here speaking, the segments of the population that are often taxed the most by the cost of that 1.6 trillion are those that can least afford it. And as we think about how we can reduce the friction and change the nature of payments, we think there's a lot of things we can unlock. Some of them, frankly, are rather science fiction-y, about the future of how an internet of value could really enable even an Internet of Things. Some of those devices on Internet of Things will be economic actors. How do we think about passing not 50 cents, but fractions of a cent? How do we make that truly enabled through this Internet of Value? So how do we get there? Well, blockchain technologies certainly represent a major step forward and an opportunity. Now, I am one of the first to admit and acknowledge there is a lot of hype in the blockchain space. President Clinton also made a comment this morning talking about genomics and how there's been, the $3 billion they kicked off an industry around genomics, and we haven't yet fully seen the results. I think we still are in the earliest days of blockchain technologies, both for payments and other industries. We see a lot of experimentation, but we haven't yet seen that many examples of it truly rolling in production. Ripple's unique in its ability to say we have real live use cases and real production flows. So by bringing these three pieces together, I think we truly can enable an Internet of Value. We can enable money to be interoperable in the same way goods, in the same way data, and to truly enable a bonfire to exist in enabling global commerce to accelerate, to enable the industries, and frankly, even a segment of the population to be brought into the fold. So let's build. Let's not think about just disruption. Let's work together. Let's build what that future looks like. Well, when Ripple started 5 years ago, from the earliest days, our mission statement has been something pretty simple. The Internet of Value, enabling value to move the way information moves today. Now, I'll be honest, some of you watch the HBO series Silicon Valley. You see a headline like that, like, what the hell is he talking about? Like, that's kind of, and frankly, when I go and talk to people in government, I talk to financial institutions at a senior level, sometimes I talk about this Internet of Value and they don't really know what to do with me. But I talk about a more, frankly, slightly more mundane step towards that, which is really removing the mission we talk about in the shorter term is to remove friction from global payments. This is the point at which there's the highest friction, the highest error rates, and the slowest experience. So I think one of the reasons why Ripple has been successful is because we've been very focused on one use case. There's a lot of things going on in the blockchain world, and there's companies that I think, to make fun of myself a little bit, have their own peanut butter problem. They've spread themselves very thin. They're working on lots of different initiatives. And I think Ripple has gone deep in understanding the payments problem and how we can address that using these technologies. So let's take a moment to talk about understanding that problem. Some of you also may have noticed as you've been downstairs that there are some airline chairs. Now, some people who work at Ripple thought that those were airline chairs because they used it as a demonstration because our expense policy doesn't allow them to sit in the big seats. And they sat down in them, they grabbed the CFO of Ripple, Ron Will, and they're like, hey, look, how can I do this? I fly to Kuwait, how can I sit in these seats? That's not the problem we're here to talk about. I often point to the fact that if you wanted to move $10,000 to London today, if you wanted to move $10,000 to Kuwait today, the fastest way to do that is to get a car, drive to SFO, buy a plane ticket, and fly the 14 or 16 hours to Kuwait such that you have the money there. That's a crazy statement. In a world where I can stream video from the space station, literally, I can't move my own value efficiently between networks. So one is, it is slow. The second is, I'm always amazed, Swift has a reported error rate of 6%. Imagine if 6 out of every 100 Google searches you did had a failed result. That's a crazy statement. We have an observer to our board of directors who's a CFO of a Fortune 50 company. He actually said in their experience, they do a lot of cross-border transactions, he said to us that they see an 11% error rate. Now again, this isn't to say that these aren't correctable. It's that human intervention is required, and it slows things down and obviously has costs associated with that. Most impactful is the trapped liquidity that is inherent in the cross-border, in the correspondent banking network. We've seen estimates from the players like major consulting firms estimate there's $10 trillion trapped in accounts around the world, enabling the current correspondent banking infrastructure. To the extent we can make that more efficient, we can dramatically change even the economics of many different payment companies, banks, and again, making this more efficient for global commerce, making more capital available to put to work to banks' core mission, not to pre-fund and have the dynamics associated with that. Now I think, again, going back to why has Ripple enjoyed some momentum, tailoring the solution and really understanding the solution makes sure it matches the needs of the customer. And if you look at how global payments today, one of the things I have pointed to is companies like Amazon employ a couple hundred engineers, and all they do is they integrate into payment networks around the world. So Amazon today, last time I checked, could only support payouts in 19 different currencies. Amazon is, I think one of the $2 trillion companies, and yet Amazon, their marketplace, which is a huge piece of their business, they can only pay out in 19 currencies. And that is a hodgepodge of integrations around the world, ranging from India to China to the EU. Now, if you think about the implication of that to more tangibly a business, we have had conversations with other networks, other marketplaces like Uber. Uber knows that if they can pay their drivers more frequently, the retention of their drivers goes up. Uber has a big challenge in that people join to become drivers and then they churn out. That means that Uber has to go acquire new drivers. That's not a great thing. Now, some of you probably took a taxi here this morning. When you got out of the taxi, you either paid them in cash or you paid them with a credit card, which frankly would settle in a couple days. In contrast, when you're using Uber, the Uber drivers get paid every 2 weeks. Why is it they get paid every 2 weeks? How can we reduce the friction so every time you get out of an Uber, the Uber driver gets paid? Uber wants that to happen, and despite being obviously a major player, the ability, the friction even associated for someone like that is challenging. Our vision is to truly enable global payments such that you can plug in with one API, and whether you're seeking liquidity, whether you're seeking a payment into a payment network, whether you're seeking a payment to a bank, to reduce that friction such that it is real-time and extremely low cost. By doing that, we think we can let RippleNet truly scale to serve a new set of customer demands. On demand and real time. Again, we are all witnessing a generation grow up that are sometimes pejoratively described as millennials. They expect real time. They've grown up with the expectation that this is going to be a real-time experience. They can click on their phone and have ice cream delivered in 30 minutes. I do love ice cream. Let's not criticize that. So we can make them low cost. We can truly get a dramatic reduction in the error rate such that there are not failures and deliver an elegant experience both to banks and to their customers. Ripple has been fortunate to have some really profound momentum. Many of the reasons are the customers here in the room. As a cross-section, we have announced over 100 customers. These are a handful of names. Again, many of them are in the room, ranging from Siam Commercial, Amex, Santander, certainly Remitter, Instarem. But we couldn't be more proud to be able to show slides like this, and we know that we owe our success to the partnership with all of you in the room. I'll give one specific example of a corridor that we brought live about a year ago, and that's between it's really targeted for the population in Japan, Thai workers who are in Japan who want to send payments back to Thailand. In partnership with SBI Remit and Siam Commercial, we brought this corridor, it was one of the first corridors we brought live, and we've seen dramatic month-over-month growth that has continued because it's solving a real problem for a real customer. And we compare that to some of the hype in the blockchain ecosystem. We think it's served us very effectively. So stepping back, why are we here today? Well, we're here certainly to connect all of you, to spend a couple of days talking about the industry, to bring a lot of powerful speakers up here. But we're also making a couple of announcements about what's going on at Ripple. One is, it has been a tremendous 2018 for Team Ripple. We have had a huge sales year. Just recently, we announced PNC joining RippleNet, the National Bank of Kuwait. We announced the National Commercial Bank of Saudi Arabia very recently, and that momentum has continued to build. A very important, powerful part of what we're doing with RippleNet is a network has network effects. The more nodes on the network, the more value there is to join the network. So that has continued to grow. Second, we have continued to grow as a company ourselves. I had a nice opportunity to speak with some of our customers last night at an event over drinks, and one of the things they said is how much they had witnessed Ripple changing from a year ago, that we have grown the team now. We stand about 300 people, about 100% year-over-year growth that has enabled us to sign about 2 production contracts per week. So that has been a very powerful momentum, and I will also pause and say, when I talk about production contracts, I'm not talking about experiments. I'm not talking about proof of concepts. These are production contracts with banks, with payment providers, and other financial institutions that has continued to grow because we're solving a real problem. But I think one of the things we're also perhaps most excited to announce today is that we are moving xRapid into production. That has been a big step and certainly watched across the industry. I am very impressed with the team at Ripple because this was just an idea about a year ago. We now, and actually I got an email moments ago that we've now done our first production payments with partnered with Qualix into Mexico live within the last hour. So this is a major step forward. We're excited to announce the partnership and certainly, again, recognizing we're only as good as we are solving our customers' problems, but Qualix, Mercury FX, as well as Catalyst and the work we're doing there with xRapid, I think is demonstrating we're solving a real problem, and to the extent we can do that at scale, it can have a dramatic impact for both these customers and many others in the future. But it's certainly important to us that you not just take our word for the work we're doing here, and it's been a real honor to see the participation from many people in this room that you're going to hear from in the coming days. You're going to hear from a logo slide of a whole bunch of different companies you're going to hear from. Some of them are groups you've heard of, some of them perhaps not, but I think it is about learning together. It's about demonstrating that an internet of value can have this profound impact, and by working together we can enable that. This includes obviously regulators, this includes payment providers, and some large global banks. So in summary, I will conclude just by saying I think it is a profound honor to have you all here. As we heard this morning from President Clinton, it truly does take a movement to change the world. When I joined Ripple about 3.5 years ago, somebody in the audience asked me, why is it that I wanted to join Team Ripple? And I quoted, a gentleman who's often quoted in Silicon Valley, Steve Jobs. I think many people in Silicon Valley want to put their little dent in the universe. And I think by working with everyone in this room, we have the opportunity to do that in a pretty profound way. So I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank you all for participating over the next couple of days. And I look forward to meeting more of you as I'll be around the next couple of days. Look forward to meeting more of you then. Thank you very much.